live actually from Jerusalem in the afternoon. It's 6 o'clock in the evening, about 36 hours after the Iran regime-backed Hamas infiltrated Israel and undertook an unprecedented massacre of hundreds of Israeli civilians, men, women, and children, 2,000 wounded, and the numbers keep rising. And there are many scores of people kidnapped. We don't know the exact number of those victims at this time, captive and kidnapped, having been dragged back into Gaza. What we're doing at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, one of the Israel's, of course, leading policy, research, diplomacy, and communication centers, is to bring you behind the scenes insights, commentary, and analysis of what is happening in Israel, in the larger Middle East, and of course, opposite the Iran-backed Hamas, and any developments on our northern border with Iran-backed Hezbollah. And we would like to engage you. You can send questions through the chat mechanism in this webinar. This is being recorded, and it can be also listened to after today's holiday, Simchat Torah, and of course the Shmini Atzeret holiday goes out. For those observing, we will be holding a daily briefing in the afternoon, probably at 8 or 9 o'clock a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. We will let you know of those times by tomorrow. And this is the daily diplomatic wartime alert from the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Please sign up for the daily alert that we will be issuing every single day on a wartime footing. And then this, what we call live Zoom daily alert, as we are bringing this to you now. I'm very proud to introduce two colleagues of the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, Brigadier General Yossi Kuperwasser, who's in charge, who heads all of our regional developments initiative at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs. Yossi was the former Director General of the Ministry of Strategic Affairs and the former head of IDF Intelligence Assessment. Yossi, welcome, and also welcome to Lieutenant Colonel Reserves Maurice Hirsch, a former military prosecutor in Judea and Samaria. We have a lot to discuss. I'm going to ask General Kuperwasser, would you please give us just a few minutes of your insights into the latest developments in this unprecedented situation that Israel finds itself in, probably in the 75 years of its history.
Yes, this is really an unprecedented situation where terrorists, in attempting to murder Israelis by the hundreds, were able to penetrate into Israel and take control of several communities near the Gaza border, and take advantage of the fact that the night before there was a big event where thousands of Israelis were participating, and not only Israelis, and sowing murder all over the place. Keep taking advantage of the fact that the Israeli intelligence and the Israeli military were not aware of what was going on, and were totally taken by surprise, believing that the Hamas is deterred, believing that Hamas focuses on improving the conditions of the Palestinians living in Gaza, trying to improve its capability to rule Gaza, while the Hamas was planning for a long time to launch such an attack. And this was done with direct involvement of the Iranians that guided Hamas, provided Hamas with the weaponry necessary for that, provided Hamas with training, provided Hamas with the ideas that would be implemented on the ground. This entire idea of a swarm attack is an Iranian methods that are employed by the Hamas in this event. And what we see now is that they were able to murder at least 600 people on the Israeli side. Many of them are civilians. Most of them are civilians. Some of them are security apparatuses members, and caused the injury of more than 2,000 people, and the kidnapping of as hostages of many dozens, nobody knows the exact number, of civilians, probably including some Americans, not only Israelis or people with dual citizenship. And this is where we stand right now. Now, the operation, the Hamas terror operation, is still going on. Israel has not managed yet to get rid of all the terrorists that infiltrated. We have hundreds of Hamas people killed and dozens arrested, but still we have some Hamas terrorists operating in certain communities, and they might try to bring in more. And we have first to stabilize the situation inside Israel before we embarked on a wider reaction to the Hamas operation that must lead to a totally different situation in Gaza to the one that preceded the attack on the 7th of October. And we cannot go back to where we were. The government has declared a situation of war, and this allows the government to take all kinds of steps with the military in order to change the situation in Gaza. We recruited and mobilized many reservists, something like 4 divisions, and we are going to put pressure on Gaza in order to make sure that the situation in Gaza, by the end of this, what seems to be a long campaign, is going to be completely different than the one that preceded this campaign. In the meanwhile, we already carry out attacks against Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad positions and operatives in the Gaza Strip, and managed to inflict on them some damages, but this is not the major operation that everybody expects. This is going to take some time before we launch this operation, and it's going to be massive. At the same time, we have to look at the possibility that Hamas did it for not only because it wants to kill as many Jews as they can, which is the major purpose of what they did, but also in order to be a first step in something wider. So we have to pay attention to what's going on in the north to make sure that Hezbollah doesn't join in. Hezbollah tried this morning to test the waters by launching some attacks towards Israeli positions in the Shaba farms, the Hardov mountains. Israel retaliated, and so far it seems that Hezbollah still considers whether it should join in or not. Of course, they're very happy with the results so far of the Hamas murderous and heinous attack, but they hesitate whether to join in or not. The Iranians stand behind it. Raisi and Khamenei are all very happy, celebrating the deeds of their proteges, and they are encouraging them to go on with this operation. And of course, they think that learning from what happened until now, the way the international community treated mildly all the things that Iran has done, including the progress they made on their nuclear project, that they can move farther with this activity against Israel. And they have built this entire ring around Israel to make it possible. And they are very happy to see that Hamas is doing what they are doing in order to cause Israel a lot of damage. And this is where they stand at this point.
Yossi, I just wanted to point out to our viewers and then ask you for your reaction that what we were talking about yesterday, if it's between 600 and 1,000 Israeli children, women, teens, and men and soldiers that were massacred by hundreds of heavily armed, thousands of rounds of ammunition, Hamas terrorists in between 20 and 30 pickup trucks that drove unhindered and started murdering anybody they could find in the 15 to 20 kilometer trip to the 22 or so kibbutzim and towns and cities in southern Israel. Just to understand the size of this massacre, we're talking about on an Israeli population of 9.2 million people to have lost between 600 and 1,000. We're talking at least 10 9/11s in 24 hours. That's the magnitude of this murder, including up to 2,000 young people between 15 and 21, 22 years old, who are having a Friday night nature party in a nature reserve. And these hundreds of, at least 100 in this case, or 150 Hamas terrorists backed by Iran, thousands of rounds of ammunition, drove up and just started murdering these children, these young people at will, just like sitting ducks in an amusement park.
That is what we're talking about, exactly that. And as I said, this is all driven by the Iranians who support and guide the Hamas in doing that. The leadership of Hamas is now in Qatar, celebrating as well, and very satisfied with the results so far, and threatening to widen the operation. And we are faced with a very demanding situation and very painful for everybody in Israel. And everybody is now, in a way, involved in this battle against this terroristic group.
General Kuperwasser, you're one of the leading experts, having been involved as a former head of intelligence assessment for the IDF on the Iranian file for 25 years, even beyond 25, 30 years. I think many of our viewers are unaware of the fact that the Hezbollah and the Hamas conduct a joint operations center in southern Beirut, in which Salah al-Aruri, who is the Hamas commander there, sits with the Iranian-backed Hezbollah command in that center. So there is a very deep strategic connection between what we're seeing now, what we're in the midst of now, what happened yesterday, and what we've been dealing with for the.
This was the case in 21. I think Aruri right now is in Qatar, but probably they cooperate with Hezbollah in Lebanon without him. They don't need him personally. But the entire leadership of Hamas now is in Qatar. Yes, but this is very, of course, they cooperate. They met together with the Iranians a couple of weeks ago and planned this attack together. That is clear. Now, it has all kinds of political goals beyond the murderous target and beyond the killing as many Israelis. They also want to drive a wedge between Israel and Saudi Arabia in order to prevent the moving forward with the deal between Israel and Saudi Arabia. And they believe that they are going to be able to join in more forces, not only Hezbollah in Lebanon, but also the Palestinian terror groups in Judea and Samaria, and the Arabs living in Israel, the Israeli Arabs. They also expect them to join in. So far, this has not happened, and I hope it's not going to happen as well. Israel has mobilized many forces to be on highest alert in all those fronts. So I hope this is going to deter these people from doing that. But the situation is very fragile, so everything can happen, and we have to be very much on alert.
Yossi, I just want to remind our viewers that the Hamas leadership maintains its forces as well in Judea and Samaria in areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. They have the Palestinian Islamic Jihad and the Hamas, as we remember, have operated now out of Jenin and out of Nablus, using other names and other terrorist cells, but very much under the influence and the financial sanction and sponsorship of Iran, as well as being, the Northern Islamic movement inside pre-67 Israel is closely connected to the Muslim Brotherhood and Hamas. So when you talk about the influence of Hamas, we're really talking about a multi-front influence of the Hamas movement all over Israel. In a way, you can say there's an Iranian octopus that surrounds Israel from Gaza, from the north, from Judea and Samaria, otherwise known as the former West Bank of Jordan, as well as within pre-67 Israel. Would you assess it that way?
Yeah, definitely. We saw recently growing attempts by Iran to deliver weapons to their proxies in the Judea and Samaria area, the areas controlled by the Palestinian Authority. They don't limit their efforts only to Gaza. They operate on all the fronts. But of course, their crown jewel is Hamas in Gaza right now with this murderous attack. Killing 600 Israelis in one day, it's beyond anything we experienced until now. And way beyond. It's something that you cannot comprehend, as a matter of fact. And the heinous way in which they did it, just killing people at were totally unable to protect themselves in masses. It's a mass execution of people without any protection, any ability to protect themselves early in the morning on a Jewish holiday day. It's really something that nobody can accept in any way. And of course, on top of that, taking these hostages, including children and young and old ladies, and this is totally crazy. This is totally crazy. This clarifies how fanatic these organizations and the Iranians behind them are, how hateful they are, and how capable they are to do things that look, as a matter of fact, exactly like the Islamic State activities. It's this is what we're witnessing right now, and the pickups also look like Islamic State weapons used cars. It's amazing. We never experienced something like that, and we shall have to take steps that would clarify that never again is never again, and that's what's necessary right now to change the situation in Gaza entirely, and to make sure that the Iranians will learn the lesson that trying to hit Israel from wherever they want is not going to be something they can get away with it.
General Kuperwasser, one more question before we turn to Lieutenant Colonel Reserve Maurice Hirsch, and that is the use and abuse, exploitation of Jerusalem, of the Al-Aqsa Mosque. The Hamas leadership has called this operation the flood of Al-Aqsa, loosely translated from the Arabic. And once again, just like Yasser Arafat tried or did in 2000, when he tried to mobilize the entire Arab Muslim Middle East around the Al-Aqsa Mosque, what he called the Al-Aqsa Intifada, what we know as the Al-Aqsa War of Terror. Once again, the Iran-backed Hamas leadership is using the Al-Aqsa Mosque as the rallying point to try to destabilize the entire, destabilize and mobilize the entire Arab Muslim Middle East around the concept of Al-Aqsa. Can you weigh in on that from a strategic intelligence standpoint?
Well, of course, they're always trying to take advantage of the Islamic element and the Al-Aqsa in order to mobilize the people. This time, this is a little bit ridiculous because nothing happened in Al-Aqsa. Usually, there's something happening in Al-Aqsa that can be used in order to explain for themselves why they're doing and calling their terror attacks Al-Aqsa something. But this time, there was nothing happening in Al-Aqsa. So they know it, but nevertheless, they use the term because they believe this is something that serves as a good rally for everybody to join in. There's nothing. Israel, of course, respects the rights of all people to pray and worship in every holy place, and this is the case in Al-Aqsa as well. But it doesn't matter. That's how Hamas wants to pose their activities as related to Al-Aqsa, and this is what they do. That has nothing to do with the reality. And I think every Muslim knows that. We saw that many people around the Arab world do not fall into the trap of Hezbollah, of Hamas and Hezbollah. They understand, and Iran, they understand the reality. They are not supporting Hamas. They are critical of Hamas. And of course, the international community stands against Hamas and clarifies that they regard that as a heinous, totally inexplicable and unjustified terror attack that cannot be tolerated in any sort of way or manner.
General Kuperwasser, I'm going to turn to Lieutenant Colonel Reserve Advocate Maurice Hirsch. Both you, General Kuperwasser, and Maurice have been heading very much leaders on the Palestinian Authority involvement in incentivizing and remunerating Palestinian terrorists, including the Hamas, for massacring Israeli civilians. I know, Maurice, you've been on all kinds of television networks throughout the day. Would you help our viewers understand the direct involvement of the Palestinian Authority in subsidizing, remunerating, and incentivizing these killers coming out of the Gaza Strip, who will now, those who have been captured or killed, will receive annuities for life. from the Palestinian Authority budget, which is now financed by Israeli tax dollars as well as United States assistance.
Yeah. So what we're really talking about, Dan, is that the idea of the Palestinian Authority's pay for slave system. It rewards all of these terrorists, specifically those who have been arrested or killed. Obviously, the money is paid to the families, and that's the system that they have in place. It is a huge, huge endeavor. It's hundreds of millions of dollars every single year that they use for that program. Some of it going to the imprisoned terrorists, some of it going to the families of the dead terrorists, but everyone gets a share. No one is left out. It's not like the PA, which is dominated by Fatah, leaves the Hamas people out. It's not like they leave the Palestinian Islamic Jihad out. Everyone is covered by this system. It's answers to questions that we receive in court under sworn testimony by the PLO representative saying, we give to everybody. Every terrorist has equal rights to receive money from the Palestinian Authority. And that money, as you said correctly, is money that comes in mostly from Israel. Of the PA's expenses, almost 70% of their expenses yearly come from money which Israel agreed as part of the Oslo Accords to give to the Palestinian Authority in order to help it function. Instead of helping it to function to fight terror, to fight incitement, that money is now being used by the Palestinian Authority to fuel incitement and to reward murderers. Of that money, now we know that in 2006, 2007, there was a rift between Hamas and Fatah. Hamas had won the elections a year before. They were deposed by Mahmoud Abbas, so they violently seized the Gaza Strip. But Fatah, the PA, continues to funnel money to the Gaza Strip. They say that 40% of their expenses goes to the Gaza Strip. That's money constantly flowing in to the coffers of Hamas and to the people in Gaza, and being used for terror. Why do I say that constantly into the coffers of Hamas? Because Hamas has imposed a system of huge taxation on the income of all of the people working in Gaza. So the PA knows that whatever it's paying the workers in Gaza, whatever money is being sent there, at least 40% is being taken off by Hamas. We're talking about in 2021, somewhere in the region of $1.7 billion. We're talking about a lot of money that's flowing from the Palestinian Authority towards Gaza and towards Hamas. This is fueling this entire process. But one of the things that Yossi Kuperwasser said, I think we have to develop just a little bit.
Yeah.
And that's something which we'll have to show also in animation with pictures, the equivalency between Hamas and ISIS. They're the two and the same. Hamas showed yesterday that they are capable of simply slaughtering men, women, children, old people. The pictures that are being seen now are horrific. In answer to one of the questions that we've received, showing some of these pictures is very horrific. And it's not necessarily something which Israel has done. I was just part of a wider discussion as to why that has been the case until now, why Israel hasn't used these pictures of these terrible atrocities and shown them the world round in order to possibly claim that victim status. And the answer is that those pictures, to a certain extent, also affect the national morale.
Well, this is a very important point. I'd like Yossi and Maurice to weigh in on both on this. We are facing right now, we're in the midst of an unprecedented, what they call war of perception, war of influence, war of cognition. The Hamas very much adopting Islamic warfare strategy, and the Iranian regime strategy is using misinformation, disinformation, malinformation in order to create a completely Hitchcockian reality that will not only hit morale in Israel, but will really affect perhaps their allies and others throughout the Middle East and even in the West. And the question is, if they use if they show these images that are so horrific against Israeli civilians, how does that, from their point of view, in your view, how does that help them?
So I think that it helps them in the fact that they are showing, look at the root causes as to why this event happened now, the Iranian involvement, the potential deal with Saudi Arabia. There are a lot of root causes standing at the back behind this really vile massacre and the start of this war. And some of those, that's part of the propaganda that Hamas is looking for. They're looking to show that we are the ones fighting for the Palestinian people. We are the ones that, whilst there have been atrocities committed against Israelis, what they're trying to invoke and trying to show then to the world is ostensibly the Israel's response, the Palestinian children who are killed. And every day, Dan, and this is something that we also have to put on the table, they have their own methods of spreading this propaganda. They have entire news networks that support and help them spread this propaganda. But the main source of helping them to spread their propaganda and legitimize their propaganda is the United Nations. When you have people like Tor Wennesland, the UN Secretary General's special representative, who has already said, well, what we need to do now is avoid any more civilian damages. He doesn't come out and say, well, this is unequivocally the worst massacre that Israel has seen. He isn't calling immediately for, as there was a discussion, I'm sure you'll remember, 2 years ago in the UN, to define Hamas as a terrorist organization by the UN. Unbelievably, Hamas is only defined by Europe, by the UK, by the Americans, by Israel, by many other countries as a terrorist organization. The UN has never defined Hamas as a terrorist organization. I think that has to be the immediate call now, not only to the other countries of the world to follow suit and declare them a terrorist organization, but also to the UN. Hamas needs to be declared a terrorist organization. That has tremendous implications. And their use of the pictures, whilst they don't really care about anything, they're interested in showing their own people that they are the defenders of the Palestinian people, that they managed to attack, that they managed to kill so many people. They're looking to the day after Mahmoud Abbas, the 88-year-old almost Palestinian leader. They want the next head of that Palestinian Authority. And so they're looking now internally as to what's going on, how can they promote their own goals. They know that there will be no ramifications. That's what they've experienced until now, not only from the side of Israel, where we've traditionally tried to keep that balance of weakening Hamas, but not too much that they fall apart. And from the international community, not only have they not been condemned, they've been embraced. You have UNRWA that works together hand in hand with Hamas. You have all of these OCHA, the other UN organization that's very, very dominant, working hand in hand with Hamas. And they see that until now, there's been no damage, no consequences for firing. Until now, since 2005, they fired some 25,000 rockets at Israel. The international community's response was, well, Israel's to blame for the occupation of Gaza. There is no occupation of Gaza.
Gaza is a state today.
Gaza is its own independent entity. Gaza is I won't say that it's a state, but it is a quasi-state that's run by this terrorist organization. And Israel isn't there. We haven't had a physical presence in the Gaza Strip since the 12th of September, 2005. And that's something that has to be pushed all the time. There has never been, by the way, apart from in Gaza, an occupation of another country without boots on the ground. It doesn't exist. We have quotes from people from the International Committee of the Red Cross saying, well, this is a sui generis situation. It only happens in Gaza with the Jews. Nowhere else in the world does it happen, where you can have an occupation that has no physical presence there.
Yeah, that's clear. And also the misuse of the term occupation. Occupation is actually a neutral term that has to do with the laws of belligerency between two sovereign nations. By the way, it's been applied only incorrectly, actually, to Israel, and many have used the claim of occupation against Hamas and against Gaza, ignoring the fact that there is a southern entrance to Gaza, which is called Egypt, which has been closed hermetically for years, and yet very few people.
No, it's open.
So,
The entrance from Egypt is open.
it's open.
Today is open.
There are tens of thousands of people who are leaving towards Egypt all the time. It's numbers that OCHA puts up, that the UN puts up, and that really should be. Here we have to put that on the table as well. Gaza is a very small area. Gaza is about to experience the full force of the IDF, and there's a civilian population there. That civilian population should move south. They should move to Gaza. They should move out of Gaza. They should drive themselves into Egypt. Egypt is required to accept them as refugees. They have been asked to leave. People who stay are endangering their lives. That's something that Prime Minister Netanyahu made very clear yesterday. The civilian population should leave as soon as possible, because the IDF is going to have to go in.
Well, I mean, I'd like to get Yossi's view on this also. The IDF has, as a matter of policy, warned Gaza civilians by leaflets and by cell phone calls and other means of communication before they actually attack Hamas targets. That's very little known in the international discourse. Yossi, I'd love to get your thinking.
Whenever this is possible, if you want to hit a Hamas operative, you can't give an early warning. But then what we do is we do a precise attack that hits hopefully only the operative himself, the terrorist himself. But when we want to hit a bigger infrastructure, we give an early warning and ask everybody to leave the place. And that's what we did yesterday with some of the buildings that were hit, both ways, either only hitting the specific apartment where the terrorists were operating, or giving an early warning. And that's what we do all the time. But what Maurice is speaking about is something wider than that. We warn the Gazans that if we eventually decide to move, and we are probably going to do that, to move to a wider scale operation that may put their life in danger, they would rather get away from the city of Gaza. Those who want to go to Egypt may go to Egypt. Those who want to go just to places outside of town, it's also possible. But they have to leave Gaza so that we shall be able to operate without giving early warning to every and each operation, because Gaza is full with people of Hamas. Hamas has a power of several tens of thousands of people. All of them are armed to the teeth. And they have the capability to launch rockets, as they do all the time. They have the capability to use anti-tank and anti-aircraft missiles, as they managed to acquire during the years. They have the capability to launch attacks using unmanned air vehicles. These are things that we have to operate against anyhow, and definitely if we are going to take a wider scale operation as is needed at this point of time. So, of course, the danger to civilians is growing, and the best thing for them to do is simply to leave.
These are some things that we're also going to see as we move into that, possibly into that stage of a ground operation. All types of arguments being made about the nature of the IDF's activities, why they are conducting themselves in certain ways, like we saw in Jenin just a month and a half ago. The question was raised constantly: well, why did the IDF have to plow the roads in the middle of the refugee camp? Well, the answer is simple: because the roads had been packed with landmines. We saw them blowing up as the engineering measures went through. This is something which is going to be very prevalent in Gaza, and there is probably going to be not a small amount of destruction in order to take precautions against these landmines. We know that there's an entire terrorist infrastructure embedded intentionally within the houses of the civilians.
And mosques and hospitals.
And mosques and hospitals.
Schools.
There is also important to say, mosques and schools and hospitals enjoy certain additional protections under international law on condition that they are not being used for a military purpose. Once the terrorists abuse those rights and turn them into arsenals and warehouses and places to shoot missiles from, they are the ones responsible for that destruction. I don't know if you remember just a little bit of background work that I was doing this afternoon. We'll try and put it up in the next few days. In July 2022, the IDF put out probably 10 to 15 different pictures of the civilian infrastructure in Gaza being completely covered and networked with the terrorist infrastructure. Rocket launchers being placed right next to schools, UN schools, right next to hospitals, attack tunnels, under schools, under private businesses as well. These are all things which are legitimate military targets, could, and I would hope will be attacked, and it has to be understood why this is being done. And so those explanations are also something which
this is very important
which we're going to have to address.
Both what you and Yossi are talking about, you can find really only here at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs War Room Diplomacy Center, because we are going to be dealing every day with the many charges and claims that Israel is violating this international law, that international law. You as an international law expert, Yossi as an intelligence expert, military expert, a policy expert, and our other experts like Alan Baker, who's one of the former legal advisor to Israel's foreign ministry, one of Oslo's negotiators, actually, will provide the international legal rights that Israel has and its responsibilities it has as a state power under fire, facing these terror organizations, because this has become a very cloudy area in international law. Why? Because Hamas and Hezbollah perhaps less, because they're considered a semi-state organization, because they actually control they control the Lebanese government, actually the legitimately democratic government, so-called, of Lebanon. But Hamas, no, Hamas does not fall under the rubric of international law. There's a lacuna in the law because they're not.
There's no lacuna. Hamas are terrorists. That is their status. There are civilians on the one side, and there are soldiers on the other, and there are civilians who are involved, who are direct participants in hostilities. They are terrorists. There is a specific, really tremendous amount of law that deals with those types of people. They can be attacked. They are seen as combatants. They do not enjoy the status of prisoners of war. All of that is something which exists in international law. We just don't use it enough.
Okay, Yossi, we have a very sensitive topic before we go to questions. Daniel, do we have questions? Some from our guests and participants from abroad. Yossi, we have scores, maybe in excess of 100, 150 kidnapped and captured Israeli civilians and soldiers in Gaza. In your experience, many decades experience, what kind of complexities does this create?
Well, basically in the past, this created all kinds of complexities because this was a major goal in everything we did. If you remember in 2006, when we launched the operation in retaliation to the kidnapping of Israeli soldiers in Lebanon, this was considered to be the major goal of the operation, to liberate and release the kidnapped soldiers. But this time the situation is different. I think that with all due care of the fate of the hostages, our main goal is to change the situation in Gaza. And we should put aside the question of the hostages for the time being and focus on changing the situation in Gaza, hitting hard the Hamas terrorist organization, making them pay a heavy price for what they did. And once the situation changes and we take over the area that they control, we can go into deeper dealing with the question of the hostages. Not now. It's not relevant. The government has just appointed the retired Brigadier General Gal Hirsch as the responsible for the file of the hostages. It's good that we have somebody who takes care of that, but I don't think that this is going to be a major consideration in the way we fight the war from now on in the coming weeks.
So, I'm wondering if do you have any questions?
So we have a few questions that came in. Some of them we've addressed already. For example, what is the JCPA going to do about using the footage of these atrocities on social media? I think that's a discussion that we need to develop in and of ourselves, that we've already had to come up with a solution to that, as to how we can best use that footage without really doing harm to Israel's civilian population and to the morale of Israel, which is something which has already been hurt to a great extent. Many of the pictures are just running around on TikTok without any type of censorship. So I think it's something that we need to discuss.
Morale is one issue, and it's a key issue. There's another issue, and this is a war, what they say in Hebrew, of toda'ah. It's a war of cognition. It's a war of perception. It's a war of influence. So sometimes the most disturbing photos can work in order to counter Hamas's very violent war of cognition and of influence and perception.
Without question. So that those pictures definitely need to be collated and collected, and that's something I think that we're already doing. But we need to consider and come up with a policy as to how to best use those pictures in order to forward the goals of the state of Israel. That's our
in order to expose the terroristic nature and the murderous nature of Hamas. That's the most important thing. It's in a way they shoot themselves in the foot, but they believe that this is the way for them to demoralize Israel and to gain support from their own population that is very happy to see these things. We see people giving sweets in the West, even in the West, not only in Gaza. They are celebrating this show of cruelty and terrible behavior of terroristic behavior of their people. We should also show this, not only in order to set the record straight about who exactly these people are, to support this idea that you raised, Maurice, that they should be seen by the UN as terror organizations, but also to clarify to the people in the West what kind of threat we are facing, what kind of cruelty we are facing. So all these people who think that we can live happily ever after with these people who want to murder us in a cruel manner, understand what we encounter here.
Absolutely.
It's possibly worthwhile just opening brackets for 2 seconds to discuss the fact that just a month and a half ago, Mahmoud Abbas, the so-called moderate Palestinian Authority, was in Egypt trying to, what they call, reconciliate with Hamas, bring together the forces of Hamas and Fatah to reunite the Palestinian Authority. These are the people that they're trying to get into bed with. These are the people that they, if you look on anywhere, at least as far as I saw today in the Palestinian media, there is no condemnation of the tremendous violence and the massacres that were carried out. It was Mahmoud Abbas that previously prevented and campaigned against designating Hamas as a terrorist organization. This is the reconciliation. That's just to close that bracket just for
it's very important that you both made held this commentary, because what we want to do at the Jerusalem Center is provide our friends, our supporters around the world, in the English-speaking world, with the necessary weaponry, diplomatic weaponry, Israel's rights, legal weaponry, strategic weaponry, intelligence weaponry, that they can actually go out and be confident in Israel's position, because this is a multi-front war. It's a legal war, it's a kinetic war, it's a diplomatic war, it's a political war, it's a media war, international court war. And so that's what we see ourselves doing here, as creating context, perspective, and proper analysis in order to expose the enemy and basically not only reconstitute but strengthen, bolster Israel's rights and the truth in what is really going on that they will not see in the vast majority of reporting, commentary, analysis in major networks, and clearly not in the social networks. So we invite I want to thank Yossi Kuperwasser and Maurice Hirsch, distinguished scholars at the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs.
We just have one more question before
Please.
we go.
Oh, yes.
The question was, what can U.S. jury do to help for the situation? That's something which I would suggest, first and foremost, ambassadors. Every single one of them has their congressman. Every single person should be sending these demands to their congressman, really mobilizing to ensure that there is a clear understanding that Hamas is a terrorist organization. It is outside of the game. It needs to be destroyed entirely, and that must be pushed forward, if necessary, through US legislation that will require the UN to designate Hamas as a terrorist organization. All of those weapons that really are weapons, should be used at the moment in order to forward that goal, to push really a concerted effort to make sure that we get that designation pushed.
Absolutely, and I would further suggest that the Jerusalem Center for Public Affairs, which is really becoming the Jerusalem Center for Foreign Affairs, has established and is launching a very robust communication center in Arabic and Farsi as well as in English. Yeah. We are in touch with Arab countries, both above the radar, under the radar, and they're depending on Jerusalem Center analysis actually to get the real independent story and truth out there. And if you can in any way possible support us in this effort of mobilizing our Arabic and Farsi and English communication center, we are going to be impacting the entire Middle East in its own native language, which is primarily Arabic, as well as in Farsi. We're already doing that. Please be in touch with us. You can email either I think it's Yossi at jcpa.org or Diker at jcpa.org or Maurice at jcpa.org or jcpa at jcpa.org for more information about how you could partner with us, help us. We'll report you our results, and we really see ourselves as not only the ambassadors in the English language between us and English-speaking Jewry around the world and our other friends in English-speaking countries around the world, but also we have Ambassador Freddie Etan that runs our French desk, and Ambassador and Dr. Fiamma Nernstein, one of the great Italian, former Italian lawmakers, also and a key ambassador to our European audiences. And we really look forward to working together with our friends in North America in order to achieve this, keep Israel safe. It's a very, very difficult time, unprecedented in Israeli history, but together we'll get through with it and we'll emerge victorious. Thank you very much, General Kuperwasser, for your insights and commentary today, and we'll look forward tomorrow to updating you and offering more analysis and commentary together with our scholar expert practitioners here that we had today and others that we'll bring in tomorrow and in the following days of this evolving wartime situation.